Okay, thank you. 10 seconds. All right, good evening. Hold on. Try that again. Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, February 23rd Lunenburg Finance Committee meeting. I'm Chris Menard. Evan is here today remotely, but he's asked me to chair the meeting in person so that it kind of goes a little smoother. He is going to be running and letting people in the Zoom as well, so we'll tag team this tonight. All right, so in accordance with the requirements of open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over Lunenburg Public Access Channel and on Facebook Live and on the Public Access Facebook page. There is a Zoom information on the agenda, which can be found at lunenburgma.gov, which has the passcode and the room link, as well as the toll-free numbers. The agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at this meeting and are reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as the results of these discussions. Because we are in a hybrid meeting tonight, those would have to be roll call votes. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may be brought up for discussion to the extent permissible by the open meeting law. So can we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so for the first order of business, are there any announcements? Evan, I don't know if you had any announcements.
No, I'm going to wait until public comment for mine.
Okay. The agenda doesn't have public comment, but at this point, we usually do public comment. So is there any public comment from the board?
It's on there. It's number 10, just so we could I moved things around so we could get people in starting at 7:05.
Okay. All right, any public comment from the public before we start? Okay. All right, so as I mentioned last week, this week kind of starts our budget season, if you will.
Recording in progress.
And the presentation by the department head. So tonight, we have Council on Aging, Land Use, as well as Library. So why don't we get started? So Sue, you're up first, Council on Aging.
Sue Doherty, the director at the Lunenburg Council on Aging, now known as the Lunenburg Adult Activity Center. I have to throw that in there. So I'm here tonight with our FY24 budget presentation request. And I did send a PowerPoint. Did everybody get that?
I think
Yes,
Okay.
It's on our drive if you have to look for it.
So, pretty basic and pretty quick. We asked for a $29,338.53 increase to our budget this year, mostly to hire a part-time outreach assistant, which would be non-benefit. That would only be 10 hours per week, and I'll explain about all that afterwards. To bring the assistant meal site manager salary completely over to municipal side. Right now, I have it split between formula grant funds and municipal. And increase the outreach coordinator's weekly hours. She currently is 27 hours per week, and we'd like to get her up to 36, because as everything has been changing over the past few years, there is more need for outreach. She's a health insurance counselor. There's not enough time in the week for her to see everybody who needs help when they turn 65 and they need to get into Medicare or Medicaid. And that's why we need an assistant also. So for the part-time outreach assistant, what our plan is to open on Monday evenings. We're already open on Wednesday evenings so that she can come in, she or he, to help take the load off. There's people who are still working, obviously, and they need help, and they can't get in there during our hours of operation. So we would be open on Monday evenings till 7 o'clock and Wednesday evenings until 7 o'clock. And that person would come in at around 2:30 in the afternoon to kind of go over things with the head outreach person, Pauline, and they can compare notes and figure out what they're doing and what the game plan is and where they're at with different people and clients. The assistant meal site salary, manager salary, the reason why I want to bring it completely over to municipal is because, as we all know, grant funds aren't stable, and you should not pay staff out of grant funds. We thought we could do it this year, but the formula grant, it's driven by the federal census, which is taken every 10 years. They still have not come back with the 2020 census yet with results. So in the meantime, we were left hanging on what we could do with the funds in there, and with the recent changes and increases in salary with the salary admin plan, it just ate up the entire formula grant. So anyways, that's what we want to do with that. And as I said before, the outreach coordinator, Pauline, her weekly hourly increase, that speaks for itself. The volume is just, it's there. Any questions for that?
We will still apply for that grant, though, and if we
Pardon
get, will we still apply for that grant?
Oh, yeah, that's a state grant, and it comes every year, but it depends on the federal census numbers of elders 60-plus in the town, and we don't have it. Luckily, what they did this year was they used the UMass Donahue Institute. They did surveys on the populations in the state, and they always come out higher than what the federal one does because people don't return their census. A lot of people don't. And, UMass, they have other ways of figuring out how many people are in the towns and stuff. And I always knew the number of people in Lunenburg, age 60 and over, was higher than what comes out in all the census counts. So that's why we're going to do that. I just don't, you don't know where it's going to be. We don't even know if the number will be out in spring of 2023, and it should have been out by the end of 2020, and it wasn't, so. So why do we need more staff and hours? To have full office staff coverage available 5 days per week, including Monday and Wednesday evenings. To offer an additional day of evening hours for those who cannot come to the center during daytime hours for outreach, help, and programs. In FY22, we had 122.48 increase in patron participation at the center. That's big, and every year it grows, except for during COVID, which was totally different. And in outreach services in FY22, we had a 30.48% increase. And another little fact, we keep our stats through My Senior Center that every time someone comes in, they sign in on the computer what they're there for, how many times they're there. And at the end of the year, we generate a report to the state using those statistics. And so far, when I put this PowerPoint together, as of February 16th, 2023, we've had 735 people sign in for events, like one time. That's just up till February. And in FY22, at the end of June, at the end of the fiscal year, we had 772. So we're projected that we're going to exceed that number, I mean, very easily. And then I just go on to explain what state formula grants are. Formula grants are funding programs that you do not compete for, even though you must submit an application and meet other specified requirements. They ensure that designated recipients will receive funds and are usually administered and managed by state administering agencies. And that would be the Elder Affairs in Boston and the governor, of course. And COA formula grant funds are designated for Massachusetts cities and towns to be used for programs and services through the councils on aging for residents age 60 plus. And as I explained before, the amount that each municipality is given is driven by the federal census every 10 years. Some towns, they get a minimum of like $5,000 because they only have 50 residents age 60 plus. Cities, of course, get a lot more than we do. In 2010, the federal census showed that we had 2,103 Lunenburg residents age 60 plus. Like I said, the 2020 federal census has not been officially released. And according to the UMass Donahue Institute, I don't have the number in there, but I'll go back to the one before. The FY22 dollar amount for Lunenburg was $12 per elder at 2,103 elders. So we got $25,236 with the federal census numbers. And the FY23 dollar amount for Lunenburg was $12 per elder at 3,231 that they counted. So we got $38,772. And it's not guaranteed that the federal census is going to come in our favor, and it's predicted to be a lower amount to come in. So that's why I want to take that position and put it fully into the municipal side, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. I mean, I had to scramble and work with Heather and do some quick funding switches and things like that and we didn't find out that amount until I think it was October, November. And we were, already a quarter into the fiscal year.
Do they ever change that $12?
They do, they can, they absolutely can. It all depends on the governor's whim. I mean, when Governor Baker put that in place 4 years ago, and knowing full well that this, the counts were going to go up in the census at some point or another. So they kind of they didn't make a secure bargain with Massachusetts Councils on Aging about that dollar amount, but they're always looking to cut something in the state someplace. And so this was before COVID, and they agreed to, well, we'll probably cut that $12 down so we can fund other programs too, which they didn't. He kept it in place, but that doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. So we're at the whim of the state. Any other questions on that? So in July 1st, 2023, we're planning on changing our hours. We're going to have staff in the office all the time. I mean, there's days when I'm in there alone, Pauline's in there alone, Amanda's in there alone, Amanda's alone at night in there. It's not working good. People take vacations, people get sick. So we want to do Mondays 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., Tuesdays 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., Wednesdays 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., Thursday 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and Fridays 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. also. And that way it just makes it even and easy for everybody. So that's my budget.
Okay. All right, so any questions from the board?
I do have a question. So
Sure.
at least what I have, so the 224,000, right? That's the
whole budget
That's the whole budget,
with the increase,
right?
right?
And so is that the entire budget? But so what happens? The grants come in. Will this reduce what you're asking for from the town, or no?
No,
No.
no.
So what happens? I just don't understand the funding side, I guess.
The formula grant, like I explained, that was, that's a state grant that comes every year. That $12 amount is not a fixed amount. That can be taken away at any time. And the reason why I want to bring the other half of the assistant meal site manager over is because she's 19 and a half hours a week, and that was all driven by when salary admin plan raised the minimum wage up, which is great for everybody, but it's not great when you have a budget and a grant that's not going to cover it. And luckily, Heather said she would cover it until we could figure out what was going on, and luckily, they gave us the money according to the UMass survey, which was more than what we expected, so we were able to right the ship again. But we can't go through that again because we don't know what's going to happen. And if they're working on the plan again, salary admin plan again, it could go up again. So I'm leaving the 2 KitchenAid assistants in the formula grant funding because I can sustain that. I can't sustain her over there. So,
I'm sorry, maybe I'm just being slow here, but to fund the 224, is there, the grants you're talking about, do they go to that 224? Or
No.
they're for different, so what do you use that money for?
we use it for supplies, to pay the 2 KitchenAids. We use it for mileage. We use it for licenses and classes, and MCOA has different things they do every year that we have to pay to go through, education, things
Okay.
like that. Software licenses, things that I can't do in my municipal budget. We pay for entertainers to come in. For the elders, we don't pay for special meals or anything like that. Memory Cafe will pay for that out of there, along with using Supporters of the Eagle House. That's our 501c3 fundraising
Ask
group.
about that too, yeah.
Yeah. So last year, they committed to $10,000 for us, the Supporters of the Eagle House.
Okay,
And that money goes very quickly.
okay. So there's the 224 that you're requesting from the town. There's the other grant money that comes in and used for different things. There's, I'm sorry, the Eagle,
Supporters of the Eagle
Supporters
House.
of the Eagle
Yep.
House, yep, okay. Is there anything else that,
I apply for different grants at different times, but they're specific what they go to. I'm batting 0 in that department this year with grants for the new patio and everything like that, but
Right.
we're, keep pushing forward. Those are that's usually for the Memory Cafe, or pay for the facilitator's salary for the Memory Cafe, things like that. We got some small ones. The Friends of Neshoba Valley Hospital gave us $500 for, Memory Cafe stuff and all that. And the United Way, they gave us $7,500 to go towards the patio construction, which is kind of going very slowly right now, but still moving forward. So that's it, just different grants that I apply for, go for specific items. Supporters go to support everything at the senior center, such as if I needed furniture or something like that, they'd buy it. They're always raising funds and stuff like that we can't do. And the formula grant supplements my municipal grant, my municipal money.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any questions, Tom? Jay, any questions, or Evan?
Is the state grant money where it's been delayed, do you know if that would be retroactive back to 2020?
No, what we got money, it's not going to be retroactive. In 2020, we actually got the 25,000, was it, I said, for the 2,103 people that they counted. That's what they gave us. And then we were waiting to hear, okay, they have to get it done by this amount of time, and it wasn't done, it wasn't done, it wasn't done. So they went with the UMass Donahue Institute, And they told us from Executive Office of Elder Affairs that we can keep that money even though it's a higher amount. Even if they get it done this year, they're not going to ask for any of that money back, but they will go to the 2020 census when it is finished, which will be lower than that.
Any other questions, Jay?
No, that's it.
Thank you. Evan?
I just have two quick questions. The increase in hours for the outreach worker going up to 30, did you say it's going up to 37 hours per week?
36.
36, does that make them eligible for health insurance at all?
Benefits.
You're eligible for health insurance when you hit 20 hours.
Okay.
So she's
they've
already had
been
health
on.
insurance, yes.
Okay, so we shouldn't expect a change in anything for the
No,
health.
and the assistant outreach would only be 10 hours a week, very part-time, no
Okay.
benefits.
Okay. The other question was just the 122.5% increase that you've seen for FY '22.
Yep.
Does that bring us back to numbers that were sort of pre-COVID, or have we already surpassed those as well?
We're surpassing them, definitely surpassing them. I mean, I can get those numbers up, it's really easy for me to pull the stats off. I just didn't do it for this one. But because the year before last was during COVID, and they were really down. I mean, we were doing what we could with drive-through events and things like that, and allowing 10 people in at a time. It's weird not talking to somebody, and I'm looking for a space.
Can pretend you-
Here, I'll stop sharing. There we go. Sorry.
So, every year it grows. I mean, it's just getting more and more popular. And we have a good crowd that comes up there. And as you can tell, there's people parked up and down the road every day. There might be a lull on a Friday afternoon, but that's okay, too. We need downtime, too. But I just see it growing and growing and growing.
Okay. Thank you very much. That was all I had for questions. Thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.
Do you know how many are Lunenburg residents and how many are, out-of-town residents?
I do. I don't have the out-of-town count with me right now, but that's 700 and, what did I say? People that came in so far this year. They're a mix of different people from all over. We let people come in from all over. A lot of other COAs, they charge a fee for people to come in. I don't see the reason in doing that. It's like they charge them a nominal $5 fee or a $10 fee a year. I just think that's kind of crazy. It's, why do that? We're one big giant community here and let everybody in. And we're open to people age 50 plus, too.
I had one question with respect to the patio. What's your expectation on, because I think there was capital money on that and then grant money on that. How do you see that coming in?
We got $100,000 from the state in an earmark that has to be spent by June 30th. We got $100,000 in capital plan money, and we still keep raising money, too. People are donating to our 501c3 group and designating it towards the patio. The Council on Aging voted to take, because we also have the Council on Aging gift fund where people donate to, and they designated $5,000 out of that to be put into that account also. We had another private donation of $5,000 come in out of somebody's estate. So it's out there that people know that they can donate in different ways, however they want to do it, to the supporters or to the COA gift fund.
So I guess my question is, do you see that, what's the timeline for completion? Do you think you'll be spending all that 100K from the state? And do you
We're
think you'll-
hoping before June. Engineering has been a little slow in getting back with us. He's working on bid plans right now. As a matter of fact, he just got back to me today. He had a couple of more questions. He said we should have a package next week. So we should go out to bid hopefully in March, mid-March, I'm hoping.
Okay.
And shovel in the ground as soon as it thaws.
Okay.
which could be May, now that the weather's changing like this.
Yeah, I just heard we're getting 17 inches of snow on Wednesday next
Oh,
week, so.
That's not what I heard when I came in, but that's,
Okay, so I think it's important to keep the pressure on the the engineer.
That's
And
what
I am
we're
an
doing.
engineer, so I
Yep.
understand that. As well as, the RFPs, and hopefully we get responses to those.
right.
And then, just my final question is, did you, was this budget reviewed by the Council on Aging Committee? I always forget that.
Yes,
Okay, so they've
They
approved
approved
it.
it.
Okay.
Deb Lincoln's the chairperson. If she wants to say a few words.
Actually, I'm Debbie Lincoln. I'm the chairperson of the COA, and we highly approve this budget. As a matter of fact, I want to say that Sue is amazing at getting money outside of the town. She has come up with so much money, and we actually on the Council on Aging think that she should be asking more from you folks, but she does an amazing job of fundraising on her own. These proposed hours are part of our effort to attract a younger crowd, because there are 2 nights a week now that we can invite our younger crowd, the 50-plus crowd, into our amazing facility, the Lunenburg Adult Activity Center, which we have rebranded ourselves. And I just want to say that this is the bargain of the century, because we are representing a huge portion of our townsfolk at a sliver of the funding that the town gives out. So I hope you will consider this the bargain that we do. Thank
I will
you.
tell you, I turned 50 this year, so now I can.
Please come.
Now you can let me
It's
in.
an amazing place. You will find amazing people there, wonderful programs, fantastic people to hang out with, and we would love to have you. Please come.
Okay. I was on a cruise recently, and they were playing Mahjong, so I got to learn Mahjong too, so.
Oh,
Wednesday morning.
Wednesday mornings, and the crowd will welcome you and help you play.
But we are cribbage masters, so watch out.
Oh, Tuesday mornings.
Work still, but.
And now there's pitch, there's men and women's pool, there's all kinds of exercise classes, meals three times a week. We now have a chef. She was a chef.
So not only do we approve, we think we should be asking for more. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
I have one just follow-up
Oh.
question, real quick, sorry.
You can look at it.
Is there anything that we can bring forward to our state legislature to help out with the, I guess, the process with the patio out back on March 7th? Is there anything else that, we can do from that standpoint through our local legislation?
From what I understand, and you don't, I don't want to speak out of turn, if we have the shovel in the ground and start construction before the end of June 30th, there are avenues we can take with the state to extend it out. So we just have to get to that point.
Okay.
And
Thank
for
you.
context on that question, we are meeting with the select board and the school committee and our legislators in a couple weeks, so.
Right,
We're
right,
looking for, ideas and thoughts and anything that, the community at large
right.
wants to put forward.
Yeah, Heather has a big role in this also, so I would check with her and the new facilities manager also.
Yep.
But that's how we're pushing forward with this.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, it's almost exactly 7:30, so next up is the land use budget presentation.
It's just going to take me a minute to get in so I can remember how to do that. All right. Oops. There we go. Good evening, Adam Burney, Land Use Director.
Welcome.
So, next slide, please. And I you see this slide every year, and it's fairly similar. The pie piece has changed just a little bit, but, and I say it every year, this department is people. We don't program, we don't have capital equipment, we've got people, and we regulate. The second largest portion of my budget is training. The third largest is supplies. So what we do is we manage, next slide please. So the planning board or the planning office or the land use office, it's all sort of part and parcel of the same thing. We carry out the day-to-day actions of the planning board, accepting applications, processing applications, meeting with potential applicants, following through on applications, researching zoning bylaws, writing zoning bylaws, proposing things to town meeting, material support to the Economic Development Committee, the Stormwater Task Force, the Open Space Committee, the Historical Commission, and the Architectural Preservation District when they choose to ask for it. A lot of our time is spent helping residents. I have questions about this development. I have questions about how to do this with my land. Lawyers, engineers, all that kind of fun stuff. And then we also manage any questions, concerns, issues with other town departments, whether it's working with the DPW on whether streets are public, private, how people have to deal with it, questions from the town manager, sewer department, etc. Next slide, please. This is just a chart that shows our planning board applications over the past 4 or so years. I guess it's 5 years now. So 4 full years and then up to date. You'll see that we see a lot of A&Rs. Those are approval not required plans, administrative division of land. This is how all the houses are being built. People have frontage and lot size. They can divide land and pull a building permit by right. It doesn't require road construction. It doesn't require infrastructure. And what we're seeing more and more now, and this is reflected over the last few years, is stormwater permits. And so in 2018, the federal government updated a Phase 1 permit, which is a general permit for the entirety of Massachusetts that has urbanized area, which we do. So if someone disturbs an acre or greater of land, they're required to obtain a construction general permit from the EPA, but we now have a local general bylaw that requires them to file with the planning board for management of siltation and stormwater during construction and ensuring that there is stormwater controls after construction. So pre and post calculations, not necessarily conditions, remain the same. So it's very complicated and probably outside of what we want to talk about within the budget, but that has been taking up more and more of our time. Next slide, please. The building department, I'm sure most of you are familiar with what they do. If you want to make alterations, additions, constructions to your house, you need a building permit. They accept, review, inspect building wiring, gas, plumbing permits. There's a building commissioner who does most of the mechanical and building work. We have a wiring inspector and a plumbing inspector. They do those works. They schedule and perform inspections for construction that's happening under permitted activities. They assist residents, business owners moving through the process. They handle complaints as it relates to building issues and or zoning. So the building commissioner is also the zoning enforcement officer. He requires a written signed complaint, but if you think your neighbor has got a shed or a building that's too close or is running a business in the wrong place or something like that, you can certainly make that complaint to him. He works full-time and is, fairly busy. He also, like I said, interprets the zoning bylaw and the building permits and planning board applications. He reviews them and comments. And then, I don't know if you all remember, but about 5 or 6 years ago, someone drove into town hall in the middle of the night. The building inspector at the time had to come out and ensure that the building was safe for people to enter. Structure fires, those sorts of things they respond to, trees falling on houses, emergency situations. Next slide, please. The permit metrics, you'll see that as we went from FY19, FY20, we were averaging a little less than 500. FY21, our permit numbers went through the roof, theoretically, or practically, but the value dipped significantly. And I think what that is, and what you'll recognize, is that's the throes of the pandemic, when it was really, everybody was home and everybody probably had a little project they've been waiting to do. And so we were pulling lots of little permits and doing $1,000, $5,000 jobs here and there. And all of the big multi-million-dollar commercial jobs or the big houses weren't happening. And, we're starting to see those bounce back now. In the last fiscal year, we had the Lunenburg Central project pull their building permit. So they pulled in a significant amount of the value of that, of the permits that year. This year, we'll probably see one or two more large projects come through, maybe not as large as that one, but we do have at least a portion of a warehouse of a similar size in the community. So we're seeing the numbers of value reasonably in the same ballpark and continuing to rise, with Lufa Farms potentially coming. If they file and pull a building permit, that'll be another big project, and that'll probably be in the next fiscal year. So we are seeing some new growth starting to come back. I know that over the last couple of years, new growth has shrunk a little bit, and I think that's a factor of lending in the commercial sector being a little hesitant to do too much building based on the pandemic, or unable to do it based on the pandemic.
Is this where new growth comes from, is building
It's
permit?
part of it.
It's only part of
So,
it?
well, so yes, new growth comes from building permits. It's improvements on property.
Yep.
So if you build an addition on your house, that's new value to the house, new growth. If you build a new building and it goes from raw land to a building, that's new growth, because it's tax value that wasn't there before. So when one looks at, and I'm going to say this, and someone's going to correct me on Facebook, and I'll be shamed, and that's okay. But when one looks at the levy, and if it's $2 million, you can only raise it by the 2.5. But new growth is a parallel value. So if you get $500,000 worth of new growth, that doesn't affect your $2 million valuation. So that does come from new things, not existing.
Okay. I guess my question specifically is the, the chart on the right, where is that wholly where new growth comes from? Or is that
honestly, I'm gonna plead ignorance on
Okay,
this,
that's
because I'm a land use guy. I'm a regulator by practice, and I sort of understand that financial side of town government, but I don't feel qualified to necessarily say that yes. And I think part of that comes in, this is the value of the project as estimated by those filing for the building permit. Yep. So you build a house and you say, oh, well, it's going to cost me $200,000. Well, that house doesn't get valued at $200,000. It gets valued at whatever the land is worth and whatever the final product of the combination of those materials becomes. So this informs new growth, but I don't think it's all of it.
Okay, thank you.
As I understand it. Next slide, please. Conservation Commission. If you've lived in town long enough, if you live anywhere near a lake or a heavily wooded area, you've probably had to come across conservation, either from your neighbors doing something or you doing something or something along those lines. They administer the Wetlands Protection Act. Anything within 100 feet of a wetland or 200 feet of a river requires permitting through the Conservation Commission. In addition, they manage our almost 2,000 acres of conservation land. They own a house on Hollis Road, and they manage that house in its own fund. And they also provide material support to the town in a variety of different ways. Regularly, the Conservation Administrator in the past has done wetlands flagging for DPW projects, for Parks Department projects, for Parks Commission projects, and they continue to do those sorts of things. Next slide, please. Conservation permits by year. This is, I don't know that this gives you a lot of information, but I did it for everybody else, so I thought it was important that you saw this too. The RDAs, which is the darker color, are requests for determination of applicability. I'm building a shed and I'm, 87 feet from the wetland. Do I really need to file an NOI? No, just a hand digging post. It's really just a check and balance to make sure folks are abiding by the Wetlands Protection Act, but on a very low-key level to ensure that they're not doing something that can be harmful. Notice of intent is when you're doing a more substantial construction and you may be a little bit closer to the wetland, and usually that will end up with hay bales, silt fence, the kind of things that you see in a lot of developments here in town. And the more stormwater permits we do, the harder it is to determine if it's a stormwater permit or a conservation permit, and sometimes it's both. Next slide, please. The Zoning Board of Appeals, they are an adjudicatory board. They hear special permit applications for things like uses and special permit dimensional variations. Some uses we have in town, they are intended to not be explicitly prohibited, but maybe aren't the best choice for every site in town. So a special permit is a subjective permit that the zoning board reviews under criteria outlined in the bylaw to determine whether or not noise, dust, vibration, or other deleterious effect will happen at those sites to abutting properties. Generally residential areas is what they're trying to protect. They hear variances, which are really hard to get. You have to have a size, shape, soil, or topography issue. We don't issue use variances. And then the final thing is appeals of the building commissioner's determination. The building commissioner determines something based on the zoning bylaw, and the person who is either the recipient of that determination or an abutter feels that he has erred. They have the option to file an appeal with the Zoning Board of Appeals, and the 5-member board will review the facts of the case and either support or overturn that decision. They're fairly busy on the special permit side. This fiscal year, we happen to have a single appeal, which was found in favor of the applicant. So, next slide, please. In the board's policy this year, you were looking for updates on capital projects. So the planning board has 2 capital articles. This is a regurgitated slide from last year. It's what is a master plan. It's basically a living document that guides the town's growth over a 10-year period going forward. I'm not going to read all of this to you because it's there. If you would like to read it, please do. I'm happy to answer questions afterwards. Why create a master plan? It builds consensus, and it helps the folks who sit in your position, the folks who sit in the select board's position, the planning board's position, have an idea of what, and I'm going to do the Richard Nixon air quotes, the townspeople have decided is what they want to do. It's the townspeople who showed up and helped create the plan. So if, there's 12,000 people that live in town and 50 people show up, well, they become the townspeople by default. Next slide, please. The master plan capital appropriation. So in FY20, the board was given $50,000 as a capital appropriation for master plan activities. We spent about $7,000 doing a population study, and this was in response to the fact that between 2010 and I'll say 2020, but it was really looking back to about 2017 because that's how the census works. The town was a top 5 growing community in the Commonwealth, and all of the population projections that the town had were based on the 2010 census and had us actually losing population as of 2020 and continuing to lose population into 2030, which was not realistic and wasn't borne out in reality. But formulaic grants, the MSBA process for the high school, any MSBA money that comes forward for the Turkey Hill would have been based on that. So we felt it was appropriate to work with the Collins Center, who does the population projections for the federal government, to reassess based on past practice, and that gave us projections through 2040. At that point, the board went out and issued an RFP for 2 chapters of the master plan, and all but got laughed off of the the Compass. And everyone who was interviewed said it's just not worth our time to do two small parts because the mobilization effort and the data collection is going to eat up all that money, and we're not going to be able to write anything. So we came back and asked for $110,000 last year based on information I gathered from colleagues in similar communities throughout the central and eastern Massachusetts area. So in December of 2022, an RFP was finally issued for the full master plan, all 8 elements, a review of our zoning bylaw, and an implementation plan. That is going, though there were 3 respondents, they responded in the middle of January. On Monday, the planning board will be interviewing them to determine who to issue the contract to, with the intent that April, May, June, the master plan process will kick off. It'll be an 18 to 20 month process, ending with a presentation to town meeting, most likely in 2025. Next slide, please.
I think we're behind a slide, Evan.
Yep, there we are. So, FY23 in review. Spending is generally on track. The one major exception is the Conservation Commission's advertising budget. It's just a disaster. And that's a function of the way it had been set up over the years. It was something that, so in this fiscal year, we're on our second conservation administrator, and in the past calendar year, or the past 365 days, we're on our third. So Matt Morrow, who you all may or may not know, worked for the town for a long time, retired in May of 2022. We hired a replacement for him who was working out very well. She was a wonderful administrator. She got a job with the state that was more in her field of practice. She was a water scientist, and she wanted to go and work with the floodplain program. Career advancement, I can't blame her at all. It's good for her, and actually it says a lot about our ability to attract good talent, but it hurt a little bit. So we now have our third administrator who is working out very well. She's young. She really is into the whole conservation aspect of things. She's working well with the commission. But in the transition, we had found over the past few years that we were taking in money for advertising that was being deposited into the general fund because of the way the account was set up. And they were issuing about $600 worth of line item each year. And that was getting spent down very quickly, so we were shuffling funds. Now we've altered the way that the commission accepts and pays for advertising. There is a line item in the budget which you have that is for advertising, and that's for commission-initiated business. If they feel that they're going to update their regulations, if they have forest cutting plans that they want to do, if they have conservation-related things that they want public hearings for, that's what that budget is for. And now applicants are paying the paper directly, which was always the intent of getting the advertising fee. So in the coming years, the checks will come in addressed to the Lunenburg Ledger and will be dispersed by the Conservation Administrator directly to the paper upon receipt of advertising bills, and that will eliminate a lot of the mess that we have within that budget. So other than that, we have the funds that we need, and we are using them in the manner that they're intended. Transfers, as I sort of just described, there's been a lot of transfers through the conservation budget to get the advertising line item where it needs to be. As for items that will be underspent, they're outlined there below by line item. The planning board office supply, the planning board training budget, the building department training budget, and the building department publication budgets are what those 4 line items are. The planning board training budget had previously sent me to the MMA conference. I didn't attend this year based on the fact that it came out late that it was going to happen, and I had personal conflicts, so I wasn't able to do it. And I've been able to take advantage of some free trainings. That budget may end up being spent. The supply budget, we're still we're not early in the year, but we still have some time where that may bear necessity for being spent, but it may end up getting turned back. I can't speak to why the building commissioners, I know he's been taking a fair amount of free trainings. There's a monthly meeting of the inspectors that helps keep him up to date on his certification. There is an annual inspectors meeting that's 2 days. It's out in Springfield. I don't believe that our current inspector has gone recently, and that budget would generally cover that trip as well. As for the publications, the building code was intended to be updated, and it was delayed. So this coming fiscal year, we'll be required to buy a new set of code books. So that budget does carry forward, and with a slight increase based on research the commissioner did with other commissioners on what they've spent on their new code books. And so the code book is not a single book. It's a series of about 15 or 20 books. There's the residential code, the business code, the existing building code, electrical, plumbing, concrete, and it's all very expensive. And they tend to stick around for about 3 years. It's a 3-year cycle that the IBC, the International Building Code Committee, updates on. So that's theoretically what we'll see is those books good for about 3 years. Next slide, please. And then differences between the two budgets. The two big ones are personnel-based. We are seeing a lowering of the conservation administrator's salary based on retirement of a long-term employee and bring that salary back to a lower step. We're seeing an increase of the conservation clerical salary based on a step increase. This was a new position that was added in FY23, the 10-hour-a-week position. The young woman who is in that position has been really a phenomenal asset to the department. I expect we'll be hiring for that position again, as she's a college student graduating this spring, and I don't think 10 hours a week is going to satisfy her employment needs, but she has been wonderful in keeping the department consistent between the transition of the two administrators this year, and she's done a lot to get the financial aspect of that department sorted out in a way that is consistent and easy to follow, and hopefully will carry on as we bring new people in. We reduced the conservation membership budget to meet the actual cost of membership. The planning board publications were reduced by $200. The publications that we've been purchasing have been less extensive and thus less costly. We increased the printing budget by $200 to cover potential needs for printing through the master plan process. Budget has been unspent over the last few years on 57-3-100. I don't even remember what that is, but we reduced that by 150 to balance out other things. The additional $100 in the publications, as I mentioned, to cover the actual cost of the associated codes, and we took that from the building inspector's training budget, as he has been availing himself of free trainings. And that's the end of my presentation.
Great, thank you.
It's a lot of talking for people.
That's great. Let's go through any questions. We'll go down the line like last time. Caesar, any questions?
I don't have any questions, but thank you.
Tom, no?
Good.
Tom.
Thanks.
Recording stop. Recording in progress.
That was my fault. I was trying to turn off or close the chat thing, and it's right next to the recording.
Okay. Jay, any questions?
Just the cost on software for the permitting. What's the cost to operate that?
I'm sorry, you broke up a bit.
The cost to maintain the permitting software,
That is, so there is a technology fee added to permits, and that is deposited into, I'm going to say this wrong, I think it's a revolving fund, and that is managed through the IT department. They pay the bill, and it is supplemented somewhat through municipal budget, but I think the technology fee in FY23 paid 65% of it. So as we increase, the more permits we have, the higher the fees are, or the higher the value of the permits, the higher the fees are, because
Right.
it's based on a percentage of that fee.
you know how much the technology fee is?
It's 5% of the permit fee.
5%.
So on a base for permit, it's $250. The base fee for a building permit is $50, so $250 would be the 5% of that.
Okay.
Any other questions, Jay?
No, that's it.
Evan, any questions?
Just one. The master plan.
Yes.
How in hand do they work with the Municipal Building Design Committee? Or are they intentionally kept separate?
I guess we'll find out. And so, and that's really the trick of it, is the planning board is responsible for the master plan. The master plan is a community document. There is an entire chapter on municipal facilities and services, and in general, that is looking at where the town houses its operations and what services it provides, and providing a direction based on interviews with staff and public meetings on how to move that forward. In general, I have advised the planning board that a master plan committee would be advisable. And often it's made up of members of other committees, which here in Lunenburg we love to do, but we run into STP, which is the same 10 people, and everybody only has so much bandwidth. So how that kind of rolls out is yet to be determined. The Municipal Building Design Committee would at least be included through an interview or have the opportunity to engage in the public dialogue sessions. What the planning board's looking to do and what they included in their RFP was looking for the respondents to outline how they would engage the widest variety of citizenry, and specifically those folks who aren't regularly involved in municipal government. So not to exclude those who are involved, but to try and be a little bit, cast a wider net and be a little more holistic about how people bring their thoughts and their needs and desires to the master plan process. I don't know if that answers your question.
About as well as I can expect it can be answered, honestly. It's going to be interesting, I think, to see how well they mesh together. And
It will. And, and I think hopefully there's a lot of, not hopefully, there's a lot of work and effort and work product from the Municipal Building Design Committee and its predecessors that will translate into the master plan. And what I've found in other communities where I've done master planning is having someone who doesn't have a dog in the fight make a recommendation or point something out isn't going to change everybody's mind, but it certainly will make some people stop and say, maybe they're right. And, maybe we do then spend another 10 years talking about this, but maybe it shifts the needle just enough that there's some progress in one way or another.
There is a member of the planning board on the municipal.
Yes, there is.
Right.
Yeah.
And I on that committee, I started in the middle of it when Peter left.
Okay.
So I don't know if we ever talked about the master plan, but I will make sure I bring that up at the next meeting.
Okay.
That's a good point.
And I'm sure the member of our board who's on it will be vocal about the master plan once we really start getting it rolling.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Evan. So just one question I have is on, on stormwater, new regulations coming in. A lot, you see a lot more stormwater runoff across town. I won't get into specific ones that you probably don't want me to today. But just in general, do you see that going forward, we're going to need more budget related to stormwater issues? Is there a budgetary impact of all these things?
Man, that's a loaded question. And yes, and yes. I think part of the issue, and this is I don't think it's controversial, but maybe that's just my own ignorance, but global climate change has completely altered the way that climate works. I mean, it's in the name, but weather patterns are different. Storms are more frequent. They're more intense. We had a freeze and a warm January, so we had pouring rain, which normally would have been a foot or two of snow on top of frozen ground. So we're getting all of these mixed signals. And in that, when an engineer goes and designs systems, they use this really fancy program called HydroCAD, which calculates all of the different factors and has algorithms that, based on historic climate trends, on how rainfall happens here and there, and what's a 10-year storm and a 100-year storm, and how much water is this and that. And over the past 10 years, those numbers are starting to come out of whack. And what was a 100-year storm in 2000 is not a 100-year storm anymore. It's a 10-year storm maybe, or a 25-year storm. I'm not an engineer, so I'm just kind of pulling stuff out anecdotally. But until those processes catch up, we're going to be and I don't want to say misdesigning because they're not. They're designing based on the criteria that they have. But the criteria is flawed. So the design is flawed in practicality, but not in theory. And all we can go on is theory. And until there's a standardization of moving that forward, which they're sort of slowly starting to do. I mean, they're engineers. They move slowly and cautiously. So until that happens, we're going to be dealing with more and more of these sorts of things. Now, as far as a stormwater budget goes, the impact for a stormwater budget for the town is less about the rainfall, and that is part of it, and it's more about this permit that I mentioned. And that permit covers the town's municipal separate storm sewer system, the MS4. And that's all of the catch basins and the pipes and the swales and the rain gardens and the detention basins that we own throughout town, whether it's the one by the library, the one on Butterfly Lane, or the catch basin out in the street. And we're required to maintain those to a certain standard, and we're required to do certain testing and monitoring and dry weather, and we're coming up on wet weather where we have to find somebody to go out in the rain to go to all these outfalls with a little cup and fill it up and do some testing and see if there's, surfactants or phosphorus or that kind of stuff in there. And this is all unfunded mandates through the EPA. And so the Stormwater Task Force, which was mentioned as something that the planning board provides staff assistance to, is in charge of that. And one of their mandates when they were created almost 9 years ago was to come up with a consistent, stable funding source to manage the MS4 system. And they're just now really starting to get to a point where that's something that they're able to be digging into. And they're collecting data with the DPW director on what his expenditures are towards stormwater and what those capital needs might look like going forward. And I don't want to talk out of school because no one's proposed anything, but the more successful communities that have done these sorts of things have created enterprise funds for this. Some people call them stormwater utilities. I think that's a misnomer because you're not buying buildings, you're not buying trucks, you're not doing this. You're creating a separate silo of funding for stormwater. And then how you fund that is, it can be a fee, it can be transfer, it can be a lot of different ways. But what that does is it removes that funding out of the DPW budget, puts it into an enterprise fund like the sewer, and you create this consistent funding, and you free up the general fund budget for general fundy sort of things. Will we ever get there? I don't know. I don't know if that's the direction the Stormwater Committee wants to go. There's about, I think it's probably 12.5 or so of them across the Commonwealth now. And their success is variable. Some of them are really successful, and some of them are really just kind of limping along. But it allows the town to address a lot of these issues in a way that, and if you do it through a fee, that fee is charged to all properties, including nonprofits and tax-exempt properties. And how they get to that fee is something that I could spend hours talking about, and I'm sure you want to hear about the library, and nobody at home wants to hear about all that right now, especially where we're not even close to approaching that.
Okay, so I guess, does the town have like a stormwater model for the town? Does it model how stormwater
I don't
runs
believe
throughout
that
town?
we do.
Okay.
That would be a really nebulous task, because stormwater, even when you develop a parcel, you develop it into catchment areas, and you treat each catchment area individually. So if you've got a 10-acre parcel and you're going to build 5 houses on it, depending on the topography and where certain soils are and where you're putting certain things, you're drawing these really fuzzy lines that you're then grading the lot to capture and treat each different portion of that in a certain way. So doing that on a 27 square mile basis would be really challenging. I think, and this is probably a better question for the DPW director, because, and I only say that because he is an engineer and this really falls within what he does, but it's looking at each area where there's a significant stormwater problem, addressing that problem on that site or in that area, and how that works. I know you said you weren't going to talk about a specific project, but the Flat Hill project, everyone knows that's a problem. And addressing that stretch of Flat Hill Road and the adjacent areas and figuring out what will work there takes care of that for the time being. And then you address the next biggest issue. And if you need to adjust, you go back and you say, okay, well, that worked, but here's a secondary issue that comes from that. How do we work that in? And it's sort of like putting your finger in the dam and trying to keep the water from going through. You're constantly trying to address what the biggest problem is at each time.
Okay, so one other stormwater one. So I know, watching the planning board, because apparently I've got no life, a lot of times you do put in retention on, you mandate retention ponds, you mandate these gardens, et cetera. Who is actually the ones that go out and monitor that they were implemented properly, and if there's any conditions on them for maintenance that make sure that they're maintained properly over time? I guess my question is,
we have a peer review engineer who works for the town and is paid by the applicants, and they review the applicant's engineering, or the applicant's engineer's engineering, and determine that it meets engineering standards and it was done according to the standards that I spoke about earlier. Excuse me. They do periodic inspections through installation, and they review the as-built plan to ensure that it was installed and completed per the permit. Okay. The homeowners, per each stormwater permit, homeowners or business owners or whomever, are required to perform the annual maintenance. And they're required to file an annual report with the planning office by July 1st of each year, outlining the maintenance that they had done in the previous year. So things like rain gardens, it's ensuring that dead vegetation is removed. If an actual plant dies, it's replaced. That refuse is removed from pea stone diaphragms. For larger detention basins, it's more complicated, but often those are going to be on commercial parcels, and those folks tend to hire someone to do that.
Okay, so you have an engineer that is, I guess I'm looking at, is there the equivalent of a building inspector or a wiring inspector?
We have a peer review engineer, yeah. He's a qualified PE who does the inspections.
Okay, and you think, I mean, I would suspect as you implement more of these through the planning board, you're going to need more of that time. Is that accounted for in this year's budget and planned for in future
The
budgets?
board doesn't pay for it. The town doesn't pay for it. The applicants pay for it.
On an annual basis as well?
Oh, no. The annual basis is just submission of reports that they were done. So that would fall on my office. So it would probably fall on me. I would expect that as we do more and more of these, it would either mean a part-time or greater additional planner in my office, or depending on how anything shakes out with the Stormwater Task Force and that, if we were to create an enterprise fund or create some other additional stormwater line item, an engineer or other stormwater monitor could be retained through the DPW.
Okay.
And that may actually be, to me, that may be a better solution, and then flip those reports to that person. And if you had a stormwater either engineer or someone who's trained in stormwater, they could address town issues as well as monitor the installation of existing BMPs.
Okay. All right, I'm sure we can talk at length on it.
You know me, I can talk.
Yeah.
No comment necessary.
No comment. No. All right. Any final go-backs? All right. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you all.
All right. Next up is library. Thank you, Mia. Good evening, Mia.
Thank you guys for having me. Just get set up here so I can follow along. All right. My name is Muir Hammond. I'm the director of the Lunenburg Public Library. And I also can talk a lot, so especially on the topic of the library. Let's go to the first slide here. Got my outline here. Just give you guys a quick look at the library. Mission, some important stuff about it. Refreshers. We'll talk about our LSTA grant, go through some statistics, look at the actual budget numbers for the library, a little bit of history and looking forward, talk about some of our outside funds and what we use them for, some of our goals moving forward, and then get into the requests that we've made for FY24, and then finish up. All right, so quick look. Our mission at the library, I'm on to the next slide, Evan, is really about I've grouped it into three things: community, resources, people. And our mission statement, which was new as of 2021 with our strategic plan, which is no longer new, it's 3 years old now. Lunenburg Public Library welcomes all and serves residents of the Lunenburg area as a hub for the community, enriching our lives through its collections, programs, services, facility, and people. Next slide, please. One of the biggest highlights from the last year for us is the award of a Library Services and Technology Act grant, which has given us $13,000 to help expand STEM learning, so science, technology, engineering, and math. Some of those really key topics for future workforce. Really important to the schools, but a big part of what we try and do is support learning in the community. And so through this grant, we're designing and building circulating kits that people can borrow and take home to help kids or really anyone learn some of these skills, learn some of the concepts around them. Some of these kits will even be appropriate for classroom use, with kind of multiple sets of the robotic tools and pieces that teachers could use. We'll also be organizing, in particular, children's programming to help teach those skills and concepts for future careers. And then the all ages comes into the final step, which is developing ongoing repair clinics, which is kind of a trend around the world to enable the sharing of skills and expertise when it comes to repairing appliances, household devices, and other things around the community, to divert those things from the waste stream and keep them in use. As part of the grant too, we're partnering with the schools, with Discovery Museum, with Smokestack Coffee Roasters, the Parks Department, and more community groups to help make sure that this grant is a success. We're off to a nice start, and really entering the meat of the calendar when it comes to programs, which will continue on into the summertime when the library is at its busiest.
Who's the grant from?
Next slide. So it's federal money that's dispersed through the state.
Okay.
The money comes from this Library Services and Technology Act, LSTA, and it's part of that IMLS money that comes from the federal government to the state and then is dispersed as the state sees fit.
Okay.
So I've got some statistics here, give you guys kind of a pulse check on the library, and it is really exciting for me and great news. Start with visitors. I gave you kind of a longer term look because of the pandemic, obviously, long-term effects there. FY19 was our last full year, and we had 65,000 visitors during that fiscal year. And for our current fiscal year, FY23, we're projected to be almost back to that normal. Projected to have about 57,000 visitors. You can see significant impacts on visitors during FY20, FY21 especially, but even into FY22. But it's great that we're seeing things kind of return to normal. So just one, I don't know if you can see it, it's really small font there, but FY23 versus FY22, just the current period up to February, we've seen an increase of 147% for that over that time period between FY22 and FY23. One of the big core services that the library offers are programs. So these events where you can come, learn, enrich, enjoy some community building. And over FY22, we offered more than 272 programs and had almost 5,000 attendees, which is, after FY21, where those numbers were way down, really getting back towards what it was like before the pandemic. So again, great news. Partially this is, I think, thanks to some of the municipal appropriations that have happened over that time period. The government has started to fund programming for the library. For a long time, the Friends of the Library were our sole source of funding for that service. But with increased expectations that those things are happening, it's been a good investment, and we're starting to see return on that. Physical circulations, which is counting items that are borrowed from the library and then returned, hopefully. In FY21, we'll go back a little bit. Physical circulation. So these are physical books, DVDs, some of the other odds and ends that we offer. You've got a telescope, for instance. So all sorts of fun things. Physical circulations totaled in FY21 43,000 approximately. FY22, we went up to 66,830, which is quite good, and on track for FY23 to be up to 75,900. So that's really great. That is probably exceeding the year or two before the pandemic hit, when circulation was actually down a bit. There's some variation each year, but the kind of the previous 10 years, 2010 to 2020-ish, circulation kind of on the down, slightly on the downward trend. And it's looking like things might be on the uptick now. The value of materials circulated at the library through February of this fiscal year was around $778,000. And so that's just taking the number of times something was taken out of the library and multiplying it by what it costs to purchase, if someone had bought one at home, for instance. And so it's just a one-to-one of circulation value. In FY19, so that's the year before the pandemic, the value of circulated items was $987,724. So we're getting close to that already, and we're only 2/3 of the way through the year. E-circulations is becoming increasingly a big part of what happens. And I've got a slide later that'll go a little deeper into some of the numbers. But FY22, our e-circulations were 18,500-ish. And this year, we're on track to be way up to almost 24,000 circulations. So that is a continuation of the trend during the pandemic that people went digital. They couldn't visit the library in person, and so they started borrowing ebooks and e-audiobooks, and that has, even now that we're quite a bit less restricted, that trend has continued. So that usage is going up. Some of that is us adding some resources. Canopy is a streaming video library that you can watch from home if you have a library card. And adding resources like that has significantly impacted those circulations or usage. But I think the trying to focus on ebooks and e-audiobooks and the availability of those resources for the community is also affecting those numbers. Having more of those items available leads to more usage. Another big part of what we do, as I mentioned, the summer is our busiest time. So our summer reading program numbers for the past year, 120 people, more than 120 people attended the kickoff event in late June. And over the course of this summer, 277 children registered and read more than 65,000 minutes. 54 teens registered and read more than 90,000 minutes. And 28 adults even registered and read more than 62,000 minutes. Let's go to the next slide. So some of our budget numbers. Our FY23 total municipal library budget was $503,956. Other departments paid on behalf of the library, so this includes the DPW and HR departments for benefits. They paid $139,276. We utilized or are planning to utilize around $88,000 of outside funding. So between the LSTA grant, Friends of the Library, state aid money, gifts, it's another significant chunk. So total, those three funding sources contribute $731,230 to the operations of the library. So the next number takes a little bit explaining. There's a requirement by the state, the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, for a total appropriation that goes to the library by the municipality. That is calculated based on previous years, average, the three preceding years averaged, and then with a 2.5% increase. So it's similar to school funding and the mandated increases there. It's not an exact correlation. The calculation's a little different. That requirement for FY24 is $478,380. Our request was for $561,626, and the town manager's preliminary budget came in at $539,126. Let's go to the next slide. So on my next slide, I've got a great picture of some kids enjoying one of the resources at the library, but I'm going to talk about some of the uses for outside funds. The biggest portion of our outside funding for the library in FY23, but also in just about any year. It comes from our Friends of the Library. That's a 501c3 group administered by an executive board that I meet with monthly, and they pay oftentimes dozens of thousands of dollars to support the library. In the past, they've been there when we've needed building maintenance, money for building maintenance expenses, technology, all sorts of things. As I mentioned earlier, programming, they were the sole source of funding for programming for a long, long time. They also, interestingly, own the copy machine that's in the library and pay for just about all of the paper and toner that we use, both the staff and the public. And so the donations that we ask for in exchange for public printing goes back to the Friends to help support that expense. And one of our goals moving forward is to move that set of expenses over to the operating budget. So there is some information in a minute about our requests that comes back to that. The Friends in FY23 have pledged more than $18,000 for various uses, improvements with the building, mainly this year, a storage solution for our craft room where we're trying to make that into a maker space. We've got a Cricut machine, we've got a computer set up in there, trying to make craft supplies and other kind of making resources available in there. And this closet will help organize those things for the public and for staff. Window shades, and they've also pledged some money for a library sign on the exterior of the building. If we get that far, the trustees have been discussing it and looking at some mock-ups, and we'll see what happens as we move into the spring on that. Other sources include state aid. This past year, FY22, I believe we received about $22,000 in state aid. We use that for technology needs, upgrading some staff workstations lately. We use it for periodical subscriptions and some of the electronic databases that we provide to the public. We also have a revolving fund, so replacement fees for books go into the revolving fund, and we use that mostly for periodical subscriptions and replacing materials as appropriate. Next slide, please. So here's just a little more information about the LSTA grant. I think I've actually covered all of that I put on this slide, but we're very excited about this. It's a big chunk of money. Typically, LSTA grants come in around $8,000, so it's a real surprise and wonderful thing that ours is almost $13,000. I'm on to the next slide now. So some of the goals for FY24, these come from our strategic plan, which, as I mentioned, started in 2021. It's the first plan that the library's had in more than 20 years. Sorry, more than 10 years. I can't be sure that they didn't have one before that, but the last plan that I have on hand is from about 10 years before that. So these are the important priorities as set forth in the strategic plan. Community Hub, the library fosters strong community development by meeting some of the demand, not all of it, for a central meeting location, providing a place and services that connect people and helping bridge divides through the community. We also are focusing on access. This past year, we did receive funding for 2 new positions that have helped the library open up on Friday afternoons for the first time, and that has been extremely successful so far. Fridays are typically the busiest time of the week, if not the busiest, it's the second busiest. Depends if it's a crazy Saturday or not. But that's been, not just one of our busiest times. We've received a lot of really positive comments about being able to visit the library Friday afternoons. And that's been happening since September. I don't know if I mentioned that. Another focus for us is new and underserved populations. And another part of those new positions for this fiscal year is to help us seek out and support these new and kind of underserved library users. So whether they're new to the town or just haven't used the library in the past, there are lots of resources, lots of ways the library can help people who are residents. So both meeting these people, engaging with them, and figuring out how we might better serve them is a real focus for the library. And both of those new positions will continue to help with that. So the next slide starts to talk about some of our budget requests for FY24. One of the most important is a staffing request. So we currently have 5 staff librarian positions. One of them focuses in adult services and also functions as assistant director. And so we requested about $8,000 to fund essentially a new position that is titled assistant director, which is appropriate for the work that position does. And that will not change the total number, the head count of employees. I'm excited to do that. It's appropriate for the work. That position deals with payroll, scheduling, oversight of the front desk. They're immediately in that location, so they handle a lot of the frontline questions that come up when people come into the library. Technology is another big part of our requests, and really there are 3 things that we were asking funding for. The first is that copy and printing issue. I guess it's not an issue, but for a new copy machine, the current copy machine that the Friends own is, I believe, 9 years old now. We're still on a maintenance contract with the company, but increasingly we've had service calls out to fix minor issues with it. It is our only point to print for the public. We do have printers for staff that are available in other spots, but that's the only place if someone wants to come to the library and print, that's the only thing that will print for them right now. Part of that also is paying for the toner and paper that the Friends have been paying for. That's part of what the staff does day to day. We use printing for a number of things, marketing in particular, but day-to-day operations. And so funding those needs would appropriately come out of the operational budget. And we've asked for money for that. Another part of those requests are the security camera system. Currently on 2 sets of cameras. One is antiquated and connected to a DVR that can no longer attach to the network because it'll fry the router as soon as it's plugged in. So we haven't been able to access those cameras remotely, which is important when the alarm goes off after hours. I'm at home and have to kind of quickly decide, is there a break-in at the library? Most of the time, no. But to be able to access remotely is important. We have had some security incidents, particularly in the last year, where being able to access the cameras reliably has been important. So replacing that set of cameras is important. The newer set of cameras have been functioning very well, but they're not located in some of the key areas that we need to see. So that's the second part. The third part that we requested funding for is ongoing technology upgrades. This is a lower priority, and the first 2 of those things were funded in the town manager's preliminary budget, and the ongoing technology upgrades was not funded. Likely what that means is we'll use some state aid money to do those upgrades, but they're also not emergent needs. Another small request for increases in programs and supplies. With the strong support of the previous years, demand for programming continues to increase. The feedback that we often hear whenever we ask is, more, particularly when it comes to Miss Debbie and the children's programming, which is always excellent. Unfortunately, she's only one person, so she can only do so much. So part of the way that this funding is utilized is to bring in outside experts to do programming that Miss Debbie and the other program organizers can't provide. So expertise on STEM, for instance, is a great example. Another good example of this type of use, the Friends have paid for it this year, but it's been very successful. We've had 2 sessions of Zumbini, Zumba for kids. It has been very, all the slots are full. Julie Quirks provided those programmings and led those courses, but the staff on hand can't lead, Zumba. We don't have the training. So that's another example of what might be used for, this funding might be used for. Next slide. I've digressed perhaps into some digital trends, just a little chart for you. So part of what goes into the increased usage over the last couple of years of digital resources is the availability of items. And I thought it was really interesting to note the size of the collection for ebooks and e-audiobooks. In 2016, where this chart begins, the number of items available is just under 60,000. And currently, I think we're up to 187,000 and some odd items that are available. So that's a big part of that increased usage. But as we've talked about in past years with you guys, previous members of the committee asked some great questions. I think, Chris, you were a part of asking about this too 2 years ago. But these ebooks and e-audiobooks can be exorbitantly expensive too. So trying to provide a greater number of them ends up costing quite a bit more than providing the same number of physical books, essentially. And that comes from a number of variables factor into that, but licensing for them is a mess. Not favorable to libraries, and some of the publishers are essentially trying to cut libraries out of this kind of field by making it so expensive and agreeing to exclusive licensing for a period where libraries aren't allowed to buy a new release until other platforms have had access to it for a certain period of time. So it's kind of a hot button topic in libraries, but it's worth noting, especially when we're talking about funding. So the next slide continues some of the other requests. One thing that's worth noting, our postage costs have gone up. Stamps are more expensive, but what we're seeing is the number of bills that we are sending out is actually going up. During the pandemic, we moved to a fine-free model. And really, when it comes to library fines and fees, there are 2 things that happen or have happened in the past. One is overdue fines. So if you keep a book an extra day, libraries have in the past charged 10 cents, a nominal fee, to discourage that. And then the other kind of fee that comes into play is replacement fee. So somebody drops their book in their toilet. It's damaged, and they're responsible for it when they've borrowed it, so they have to pay for a new one. And what we did was remove the overdue fines, which, there are a number of reasons. I don't want to get too far off topic here. I realize I'm kind of digressing. But to help with that focus on access, we removed those overdue fines, because what often happens, we started with children's materials. So children are a great example. They may, a child may borrow 10, 15, 20 books 1 week. And then the next week or 3 weeks down the road, when they're due back at the library, their parents can't bring them to the library, and they start racking up these 10-cent charges, 20 books at a time for a couple of days. That's a couple of dollars. Do we really want them using their allowance to be able to continue to use the library when they are able to get back and return it? Probably not. So there's a number of things factor in here, but access is really at its core. So we want people to be able to access the library, and what these overdue fines typically do is interfere with people being able to use the library. Disproportionately, affecting those least able to pay, kids, lower income, people without access to a means of transportation, the people you most want to be able to use the library, really, who get the most benefit from it. So I think as a result of that, the bills have kind of gone up. And typically, we do send out messages when things are due, and a couple times after they're due before they're marked as lost. When someone keeps it too long, they're marked lost, and a bill is sent out. But we do have to send those out physically in case the electronic communications that have happened before that are not reaching the person that they need to for some reason. So slight increase in postage. I think we asked for $900 instead of $300. Because what we've seen right now, about 2/3 of the way through the year, that's about the run rate that we're seeing right now. We're at about $600 for postage so far this year. I'm going to skip the middle and go to training and mileage. As things have continue to return to normal, there are more opportunities for staff to actually travel to training. Less often are things available just online or just over Zoom. And so we have asked for $2,000 for mileage and training expenses. Typically each year we send at least one staff person to the Massachusetts Library Association conference, which happens typically in May. That's a great place for networking, to bring back some new ideas, and allow whoever went to kind of retrain the rest of the staff. But there are a number of things. Professional development is very important to continuing to protect the quality of library service. So we did ask for that. The middle topic is library materials. And I saved this for last because it's connected back to the requirements from the state to remain certified, which enables residents of if the public library remains certified, that enables residents of the town to use other libraries in the state, benefit from the excellent library networks that we have in Massachusetts. And part of the requirements for that are that 16% of the total municipal appropriations for the library are spent on library materials. So as salaries and other expenses increase and the total budget increases, the requirement for the funding set aside and used for library materials, essentially the things that might circulate, the books, the DVDs, the telescope even, that funding needs to go up as well. 16% is the requirement. And so there is an increase in that line because the overall budget for the library requests or preliminary budget is also up.
Does electronics count towards that? The electronic
Yes.
books?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Just about everything that's shared by the public can be kind of lumped into that.
Okay.
Yep. And I am on to the next slide, which basically recap. The town manager's preliminary budget for the library is $539,126. This does meet most of our requests, and I am very satisfied with this budget for the library. I quoted her report, which I'm sure you guys heard from her as well last week, so I won't go and read it to you, but I agree with her stance. It funds some of the top priorities, and certainly is it does address those two top technology priorities that I mentioned: the copy machine and the security camera upgrades. And the last slide just says questions, so I'd love to answer questions if you have them.
All right, great. Go again, Caesar.
I don't have any questions, but as a software engineer, I'm really excited to hear about the STEM programs
Awesome.
and the learning kits that
Cool.
you'll be providing. I think those will be a really good resource. So, yeah, thank you.
We sure hope so. Yeah, we're excited about
Sounds like a volunteer for
Yeah, if you want to volunteer, come talk to me at the library
Cool.
sometime.
Okay.
I'd love to chat. Definitely.
Tom? Oh, Tom Baelish.
Hey Tom,
You're,
how you doing?
how are you?
Good, thank you.
I said it last year, I'll say it again. My family is probably one of the biggest users of the library, so thank you
Yep.
for all that you and your team do.
Our pleasure.
We really appreciate it.
Yep.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
I didn't really understand the state request for appropriation number. What does
Sure.
that mean?
So this is part of the requirements to remain certified by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners, which is really the state group that administers the library realm. And so remaining certified means a number of things. You're eligible for state aid. Residents of the community can use the other libraries in the state. So it's really important to remain certified.
Yep.
One of the requirements is this municipal appropriation requirement. Basically, it's a way to that the MBLC is trying to protect libraries' funding, in that they require, over the course of time, essentially that the funding go up. That's the gist of it. There's a specific calculation. It takes the previous 3 years of funding, averages them, and then multiplies it by 1.025, 2.5%, to come up with a requirement for the next fiscal year. So typically what that takes is, for FY24, it would take FY22 and FY21's actual budget, add it and average it with FY23's total appropriated municipal income, which at this point is not fully expended, but they're budgeted amounts, and then average those three and increase it by 2.5%, and that's the requirement.
So it's a minimum amount that the town has to appropriate
for
to
the.
okay, all
Yep.
right, I see. So there's 470,000.
Yep.
So we're at 539. Well, we're
Well above it. Don't have to worry
So
about it right
it's
now.
not an issue. That's
Yep.
just a minimum to get these benefits of being part of the library.
Absolutely.
Okay, got
And
it.
if you remember, a couple of years ago, Fitchburg was decertified.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, they were having a number of issues. It was before I moved back to the area, but I've heard lots about it. I grew up around here, but at that point was away working my first library job, and it's not nice, because anytime somebody, we have a lot of, especially right here, with Lunenburg, we've got Fitchburg, we've got Leominster, Lancaster, Pepperell, Ashby, Ashburnham. There's a lot of travel between towns, whether it's for work or just for recreation or just visiting, and people go to the other libraries. And so if someone doesn't know and they go in and they're from a town that's decertified, it can be very embarrassing for them to say, I would like to borrow this from the library, but the librarian has to say, I'm sorry, can't let you.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, that's always a question. Even our the trustees, when we come to the budget season, often have to reiterate to them what exactly goes into that and what does it mean.
So I guess, though, to some extent, there's a disincentive to up it a lot in 1 year, because then
It can be.
gets
Yeah, there
into
can be.
the rolling window average that you have to do going forward.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. And I think, that there's a big difference there between, what we've requested, even what we received in FY23 and the requirement for FY24, there's a difference. That's partially because of things like the 2 new staff positions. That was a big, maybe not big, but, significant, contribution to this year's budget. Trying to think if there were other, anyways, you're right.
Okay.
Anything at home?
Did you have any?
I have one quick question.
sorry.
The
Yeah.
cameras and the photocopy machine, I guess those aren't capital items? Those aren't large enough expenses?
They're not. If I remember correctly, it's about $2,700 to put a large copier on the town lease, which is in central purchasing. And then I think it was around $13,000 for the security cameras that's in the IT department budget.
Okay.
Yeah, and both of those go into other departments, but they are funded, and that's really what I'm most concerned about.
I'm also glad that the Friday, I remember last year when we were talking about the Friday, and I was looking forward to that, and seeing that Friday is your first or second biggest day, that's a nice thing.
It is. That's wonderful. And I was actually really nervous how long it would take before people started coming on Fridays, and it was right away. First day was one of our busiest days in September. So Really glad that the expression that we heard that people wanted access at that time has actually come to pass, and people are using the library at that time. So
I know I get every other Friday off, and I think a lot of people do actually.
absolutely.
So it's kind of a
I'm
mid-
surprised how many adults
Yeah.
who are clearly work professional,
Yeah.
working, can actually make it in Friday afternoon. It's really surprising, but pleasant.
Jay, did you have any questions?
Did you request any ARPA funding?
Yeah, we so there are a number of things that we are hopeful when it comes to ARPA funding, or the reopened ARPA funding. One of those requests would be concerning the HVAC system, which is on the capital plan. It is on the capital plan beginning in 2031, and our experience over the last 3 or 4 years as the HVAC system maintenance has really increased. There have been a number of times where the boiler or the roof units have gone out of commission, particularly in the winter. I think it was about 4 weeks ago. There was one weekend that was recent where we lost heat basically in the library. Restored it before anything really bad happened, but that is one of the things that we'd love to have some ARPA funding for. A redesign of the HVAC system to help focus on efficiency and effectiveness, and then construction as well. Another component that we'd love to have ARPA funding for is a renovation of the teen room. One of the biggest populations that we see on Friday afternoons are students. Here at the library after school, and during the week as well. In mid-afternoon, you come in, it gets a little rowdy with all the teenagers there. Some are studying, some are snacking, some are just hanging out. But the teen room is so small that the 2-3 dozen teenagers that we have, they can't fit in the teen room, so they spill out into the rest of the library. And it'd be great if we could expand. Within the existing footprint of the building. I don't know if I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, but if we could expand that'd be great. So that's another of those ideas. And the other major piece of that we were thinking about for the library was connects to the memorial garden that is in the rear of the building, the patio area. There's a Proctor Memorial Garden back there. And we did just meet with Jean Proctor at our last trustee meeting about the history of that garden. Another component that connects to the memorial part of it is our children's garden in the front of the library, which is a raised bed right now. It's actually a couple raised beds. And it'd be great to be able to expand that to kind of reflect some of the other priorities and values that we've heard in town lately: pollinators, local species, sustainability, and create more of an educational experience with our grounds at the library. So expanding the garden aspect, expanding the health benefit aspect of being outside, having a space where mental health can be a focus. And so that's the other part of that. Hopefully that answers Jay's question.
Hasn't the heating system recently been replaced?
There have been ongoing components replaced. None of the major parts of it have been replaced recently. There was
Wasn't the control system?
I'm sorry, what?
Wasn't the control system replaced like 5 or 6 years ago?
Not to my knowledge. That might be, if it was 6 years ago, it might have been before my time. I don't think so. Currently, there is. We did have a computer dedicated to controlling it that has been removed since then, and So that, the controls are, not sure what the right word is, but, each component of the system, the roof units, the boiler, each has its own set of controls at the moment.
Well, the issue with the heating system
Yep.
has come up before. And I
Yep.
know the boiler or something was replaced after only being like 10 years old.
Yeah, I
Now-
believe the boiler was replaced. Yes, that is my understanding as well.
But then there was also something, and I believe Green Communities was involved with replacing something with the computer control system for the HVAC.
Okay.
Remember the previous, and it was probably before your time, talking about, I remember saying, kid from the DPW had to go up there all the time to do something with the HVAC, and they really wanted to get that replaced, and I believe they ended up replacing it, and it was a significant amount of money. That's why I'm questioning why we're now again hearing that there's issues with the HVAC.
Yeah, the issues continue, unfortunately.
I know. Have all the lights in the library been upgraded to LEDs?
They have, yes. That was completed this past summertime. We did finish completing that replacement, and it's great.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just have two quick questions. First one is, has the personnel committee, have you met with the personnel committee yet for their opinion on the assistant director position change? Because it's going to have to go through them, I believe, first, right?
That's a good question. We've gone through, so we've been working on this, I think, almost 2 years. And we've gone through a couple different potential ways to address the issue. We've not met with the personnel committee, is the short answer. And I believe we are just about ready to. Done a lot of research, done a lot of work, job description, and I think we're ready. So I am looking forward to doing that.
Okay, so everyone's blessing at this point except for just the final step with personnel and then obviously the town.
Yep.
Okay.
Town manager, HR director have all been involved, trustees as well.
Excellent.
Yep.
Last one is just the 16% requirement. How far above that are we currently?
Let me hold on one second. I'll do my calculations on my phone's died.
Right at
So there's a library materials budget line, which in the preliminary budget I believe was funded at $85,500, and then there's also the book service budget line, which is funded at $4,500. So those two budget lines combined are really what we look at for library materials.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do a quick division, I can't do it in my head. I think it's about 20%.
Okay. So well above.
Yeah, we have some room there. Yes.
Excellent. That was all I had. Thank you.
Thanks.
Just a couple questions. So on the camera, and I may have asked this before, but
Okay.
are we standardizing across the town on all of our closed camera systems? Like, are you using one, the schools are using a completely different one, and fire is, or police is using
I don't
something
know for
different?
sure. We have not been standardized in the past. We've got two systems at the moment, but trying to work with the IT department closely on it so that as long as that's her goal as well, the IT department head, that would be part of the plan. Maybe a better question for IT department.
Okay,
To be sure about it, because I don't know about the other departments.
okay. I mean, I
I would assume so, because we would be going with what they like best.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense then.
Yep.
So onto ebooks, is there a way of regionalizing this? And I even know, like, Boston Public Library, anyone can get a Boston Public Library card and take out ebooks from them.
Yep.
Is there a way through I mean, because you don't have to go physically to get an ebook, obviously, to kind of reduce the cost through better buying power, if you will.
We do. So our ebooks and e-audiobooks that qualify for our what we call our collection is actually mostly a shared collection for CW Mars, which is the Central Western Massachusetts Automated Resource Sharing Network. 150, 170-ish libraries in Central and Western Mass. So that is quite a significant number of the size of that buying coalition is quite significant.
Okay. So they negotiate the rates.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We do a little bit of augmentation with the collection. We contribute some more money, and we select things that people in town have asked for.
Yeah.
So it's not just there, but the buying essentially is through the network.
Okay.
It's a significant portion. They were part of what they call $1 million club 2 years ago for the first time, which is there are only a couple dozen library networks or individual libraries that are in that size category. So it's significant.
Okay. So the technology, the STEM, you showed a lot of like the children's programmer for STEM. Do you have technology for adults? I mean, like, there's a lot of technology challenged adults, right, that could maybe benefit from programming related to
Absolutely.
technology.
Yeah, definitely. The grant is definitely focused mostly on children, but there are components for adults. And depending on the success of what happens during the grant, part of proposing the grant is that the library is committing to doing more of it in the future moving forward. We do. I think you can make the case that there are a significant number of programs that we offer that would qualify. We have kind of a craft lab that happens most months. That, depending on what they're doing, is might fall in that category. And the repair clinic, definitely. One of the things that we do that's definitely directly technology related is one-on-one sessions with people who have questions or are having issues with their technology. Oftentimes it's related to library resources, but our digital services librarian is available for anybody who has questions, and they can say, well, I don't have expertise in that, but I can sit with you and try and figure it out. Or that they might have expertise in the specific topic. So there's some address of that.
Okay. Because I could even envision things like teaching cybersecurity kind of techniques.
Definitely.
For
yeah, and we
just
have
don't
in the
know
past.
them.
It has been a couple of years now since we've done a class like that. When I first came on board in Lunenburg, I wasn't director, I was adult services librarian. And one of the classes that I offered was an internet or technology security class. It was well attended, but it might be time to do that again for sure. And definitely, when it comes to programming, one of the things that we try and do is hear what people would like and try and deliver it. So I can take that back and we'll work on something too.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
When I don't know what it is. Whenever I reserve a book,
Yep.
it comes from like the library that I grew up in.
Sure.
And so I just a question on what's the cost for that, and who bears the cost of like driving a book from Northborough, Southborough out to here and then back?
So that's part of kind of the library network agreement. Is that we share resources. And so when you put a hold on a book, we might not have it in Lunenburg, but somebody else does. And so it gets sent, goes to a sorting facility in a van, in a bucket, basically, and then gets sent to Lunenburg, and they drop the buckets off and we unpack. The Massachusetts library system, which is kind of a statewide network, different variety of network, if we want to get into the deep weeds, than CW Mars.
Yep.
But it kind of administers that courier service.
Okay.
And I believe that they use almost exclusively state funding to pay for that.
Okay, so that's state funded?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not, we don't pay, although we pay an annual assessment to CW Mars, which is kind of like a membership fee. It's part of, membership fee is part
Yep.
of that assessment. I don't believe any of that money is going directly to the courier service. I believe MLS funds that entirely.
So I don't have to
State
feel
fund.
guilty that
No,
I'm driving you.
not at all. And that, that's one of the great benefits of living in Massachusetts. We have one of the best sets of networks anywhere in the world.
Okay.
And that resource sharing is so important to providing good library service. We're really lucky that we can be a part of it.
Okay. And then I guess the final one, and Evan asked this in the first one, is we are meeting with our legislators, like I said. Is there anything you have on the top of your mind, budget related or select board related, however you want to route it through, that we might ask them? If you don't have it now, if you think about it over the next couple
Certainly
of weeks.
we'll think more about it. The LED project that we did was one of the state earmarks. So, that was one of the things that I asked for a couple of years, and that whole process seems like it's been working really well.
Okay.
So off the top of my head, I don't have anything that I would mention right now, but one of the things that we've been thinking about, I think a lot of our needs are being well taken care of, and I think that speaks to the great relationship that we have with town administration, and boards like you guys,
Okay.
committees like you guys.
One that I was thinking of in general is we had a lot of formulas in the state, and I'm not sure the formulas are working anymore. I'm not sure the algorithms are working anymore, and I didn't know if there were any, like, library formulas that are just, driving you to the wrong decisions.
No, I wouldn't say so. I think we've talked about it the past couple years, but the CW Mars membership fee, because of the growth within Lunenburg, we're one of the few libraries that's, I think probably since the beginning of the network itself, had to transition from what they used to call mini-net membership, which is reduced fee, because for a smaller library, transition to the full membership. And one of the things over the last couple of years that has contributed to the increase in the library budget is helping to pay for that increase in membership assessment. And we're at a good spot with that right now. So, part of that assessment includes small libraries in network formula grant, which we may lose at some point, but I don't think we've grown enough that we're immediately in danger of that.
Okay.
And that's only $2,500 anyway, so it's not a huge issue.
Yeah.
So we're pretty good as
Okay.
far as libraries go.
Any go-backs from any of the committee members?
No.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you guys
Thanks
very
for your-
much. Thanks for
Yep.
listening. Thanks for the good questions, as always. Good
Thank
to see
you.
you. Have a good night.
All right, the next item on our agenda is Town Manager, Finance Director Report, and unless one of you wants to give it, I think we'll have to pass. Old business, we had capital plan. I don't know if there's any,
Chris, we missed something. There's a letter D under new business. The town meeting finance committee report.
oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yep, Town Meeting Finance Committee Report is the next. So Evan, did you want to lead a discussion on this, or?
Sure. So we every year that I've known about, at least historically, the finance committee submits a report that goes into the warrant that's distributed to all the town members. And it's usually, last year's was sort of just an update as to where we were financially and how we were in a good position and whatnot. And I think given the turmoil that's going on in town right now and the sort of, I would say, thinly veiled threats that are being passed around as well, I think it would be good to have at least a general position put out there from a finance standpoint, not in terms of anyone's opinions or anything, but just a here's what we stand to lose, here's what we stand to gain, and then obviously talking about the general health of the town's budget and all of that stuff as well, and purchases and whatnot. So I kind of just wanted to start bulleting out items that we can move into some form of a document. Obviously, like I said, the abatement and assessment conversation should be in there, I think. I think stressing the importance of not holding the budget hostage as a means to solve something. I think that should probably also go in there as well. And then the other portion that I had come up with was the excludable debt that we have that's falling off this year, and the report that we got earlier or late last year about our actual capital, or not capital, but our actual debt ceiling that we have that we can work within, how much money we can actually spend, and how we can apply that towards, municipal building design or master plan committee or anything like that. But again, I just kind of had this in here for a general conversation to be had to start the process of putting together a document.
Yeah, my opinion is those are all great topics. I didn't get a chance to look at what we wrote up last year. There's probably a lot of, I'll call it boilerplate kind of things that we probably should include as well. I do think we should be looking towards the future in this and highlighting, municipal design and Marshall Park and some of these other things that are potentially going on down the road. I almost wonder if we're going to have to do like a report for the warrant article and then maybe an updated report as a handout, that summarizes our thoughts and deliberations during the, to hand out at town meeting itself, just because we may not, I don't know when we're going to get answers, right? The timeline is even less clear to me now. But, if we don't get answers until just up into that time frame, it may change the report that we had in the warrant article or in the warrant. Any other thoughts on topics?
No, I think those are the relevant ones. Yeah.
Excellent, thanks.
All right, yeah, so we probably should start to frame that out. And then put some meat on it over the next few weeks. So, if people have ideas in the meantime, let's make sure we bring them into the meetings over the next few weeks and start a living document on the outline of it.
And what would be the due date for that?
I'm looking it up right now, actually. Let me get back to you.
I think we talked about it last week.
Yeah, we did. I just don't remember.
I think I wrote it on. I don't remember. I feel like it's tight, based on when our public hearing is.
So the Finance Committee budget review is due on March 23rd, Thursday, March 23rd.
Wait, what's due on the 23rd?
The Finance Committee budget review, which is what I take to be this document.
We don't even have the public hearing until the 30th, so that seems...
Correct.
It's got to go in the warrant, whenever the warrant gets printed.
So I wrote down a note that it was April 4th that we needed to have the letter to...
Oh, there it is. Okay, yes. April 4th, Finance Committee report for warrant office to Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
There you go. April 4th, 4/4.
Okay. Okay, still fast approaching, but... Okay. Excellent. Anything else on that topic? Okay, great. Again, we'll skip 5, Town Manager, Finance Director report. Old business, just quickly, any capital plan related? Okay, I I did hear that they committed ARPA funds for the vehicles
Yeah.
at last night's meeting.
Tuesday night.
So,
And the point for that was to get in the line to buy the vehicles, because it's going to take time, right? They wanted to get that sooner. That was, and then ultimately, was that was the sole reason?
that was at least a major reason.
The major reason.
Yeah, that was talked about as.
Because we have a couple more in line, but we're still waiting for those two, right? Yeah.
Okay, the next topic, tax assessment abatement discussion. I don't know if we have a ton on this one. I did watch the Board of Assessors meeting that happened yesterday, and I don't know if anyone else did. It wasn't too long, maybe you should, but I actually walked away from that meeting more confused than when I went into it. And more concerned on the timeline of when decisions will be made with respect to, excuse me, town meeting and our recommendations and, what free cash will be available and that sort of thing. So, I don't know, Evan, I almost sent some questions to you and Tom Alonso and Michael Ray, kind of outlining a thought that we should lay out a most likely schedule for all of this stuff, especially as it impacts us. Maybe that's something you want to consider doing, because I do think we need to be working towards some semblance of a timeline. And with any schedule, we may or may not meet the dates, but we should have a most likely schedule on when we think we'll get some decisions here.
I think that's a good idea. I watched it as well, and I came away with the exact same concerns and confusion. It was interesting, but I suppose at the same time, the fact that they shouldn't be they shouldn't investigate themselves. But the fact that we can't find an outside source to do the investigation is troubling.
Yeah, between the select board meeting where they were talking about this issue and the abatement, it kind of told me that one, as you said, Evan, that they aren't able, or at least unable now, to find somebody to provide additional resources to help the assessors do the things that they need to do for the abatements. And number two, from the abatement hearing, it was pretty clear that they were told that they shouldn't do the lake areas abatement, which, if that's true, I understand a little bit, because, that would be one thing. But the truth is that there's 420 abatements, and if there's 3 people or 4 people, it's not going to happen for a long time. It's not going to happen in a month. You just figure it out. If it's 30 minutes each, that's 200
hours.
200 hours. They don't have that. And that's probably more than that. And if they're going to be reading appraisals from other places, that takes half an hour just to read to give a good sense of what an appraisal is and is it any good and all that. So it just doesn't seem like, unless they are able to hire a lot of people, bring them all in here and fill up this room with assessors, it's not going to get done in a timely manner. I think everybody wants that. The question is it going to happen? I think we should plan that it doesn't.
There's also the caveat that we're nearly a month into the due date for the abatements, and they have 90 days before the abatements are decided on, and any abatements that a decision is not rendered on by 90 days are automatically denied.
Unless the assessors
they
board
extend it.
says they'll extend it, which I think
Right.
they said they would. But again, because is it going to be 90 more days? It might have to be. I don't know. But
Which I think it was one of the Lux pointed out that that's going to cause people to get their fourth quarter tax bills. to come in after that as well. So it's just going to compound the issue, I think, right in time for town meeting. So I think, Chris, that's a good idea to get a letter off to Mr. Alonso and Mr. Jeffries, at least to figure out some sort of a scheduling idea, worst case, best case, something like that.
Yeah, and I also found it interesting that the words that we used, and I don't know if this is 100% right, but the town manager directed an elected body not to do something. I don't understand how town manager or select board has the authority to direct an elected body not to do what's in their charter. So I would like to understand that, and I'd like to understand how all these boards and commissions are playing with each other, with us being one of the affected, because we do need to make a recommendation coming into town meeting, and this clearly is something that affects our ability to do so.
I suppose it comes, does the principal assessor report to the town manager or to the board of assessors? Because I think it would come through that sort of directive.
Yeah, I think it's dual. It's a ... in the organization chart. There's,
Yeah.
and that was actually discussed at select board meeting a couple of times by citizens. I would, maybe I would like to hear clarification as a citizen on what they were instructed to do, if they were, or if they was recommended or something. I don't know, but it would be interesting. It's very frustrating when you hear those things. You're not sure what actually was said. Could be. And the town people are, upset enough.
And again, the other reason I kind of want to keep this in here is to continue to harp on the fact that the town manager has allotted all free cash available, if need be, to cover the abatements, which from the looks of it, it should be able to, if they're all approved for, maximum value or whatnot, that we should be fine with that. And that's not a reason to hold up the budget at town meeting, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Any other discussions on this? Again, I do think we should stay in our swim lanes, but I think there is some questions that just made me wonder how our role in this is gonna play out. Okay. The next item was state representative meeting preparation. Again, the thought here is we do have that meeting coming up on the 7th, so it's about a week and a half away, I guess. To me, just a general item, and I mentioned it earlier, was, we need to look at these formulas, I think. I think these formulas are breaking down, whether it's Chapter 70, whether it's, how our formula for what we need to fund into Monty Tech. You just look at any of these things, and you wonder whether they're still working the way they were intended. The 40B calculations, this MBTA neighbor community calculations. Are they right for our portion of the state? So I know we pressed on that a little bit last year when we met with the delegation. We have one new member that at least I personally had talked to at outside of town meeting, I think. And she seemed interested in the whole MBTA neighbor town, or whatever that word is, as probably not being right for towns like ours. So I'd like to push those as one topic that needs to be discussed. I don't know if there's any other thoughts. So to me, those are budgetary related items that relate to it. Any other thoughts?
Well, I think last year we had a big thing on Chapter 70, and after learning all the things, was basically we're getting a 3% increase. After all the formulas, it was just, that never works, and you're going to get a 3% increase. It seems like that it's not, that the state funds are, you know, we're not getting the share that we should get, I think, in some cases. So we should continue to harp on that, on Chapter 70 reform. I don't know what it would be, but it just doesn't seem like we're being noticed out here.
Well, I have to be honest, my takeaway from last year's session was, unless you kind of form a coalition or work together with other similar towns, there's just not the political force to change anything. And so, you know, I'm maybe less enthused about the meeting with representatives, because I'm not sure what's going to come out of it unless we have a bigger kind of political plan. Not that we shouldn't make our points, et cetera. I think that's important. But I don't know I don't know the political landscape of how towns like ours work together, but that might be interesting to understand what kind of organizations are out there, what kind of ways that we can work together with other towns who are in a similar position.
Coalition of Rural Towns.
That might be a question to ask Heather. Maybe some town managers,
Yeah.
they're professionals. They probably have groups that they deal with. Maybe we can be part of that. I know Senator Cronin is, was he on the Budget Committee or Ways and Means, which I think is new, which is, it is an important committee, so hopefully he has a little bit more sway than he did last year.
I think what I'd like to do is, we mentioned this last time, is I'd like to get a list of questions off to the delegates beforehand. So I think, Chris, you and I should probably put together, and feel free if after this, send, you know, either Chris or myself an email directly with just a question or two or an idea or topic. And then I think we should at least bring forward a list of questions at our next meeting so we can actually discuss it before sending it off.
Okay.
Just to get them a little bit more preparation, so if they do need to research something, they can come better prepared. Because I remember last year with the Chapter 70 stuff, they were knowledgeable, but not granular knowledgeable.
Okay. All right, the next agenda item, minutes from February 9th, February 16th. Entertain a motion to approve one or both, or either.
I move to approve. Well, or should we ask if there's any discussion first?
No, you can make them, we can
Okay.
do it after this.
A second.
All right.
Are you moving to approve both?
Yeah, I was going to move to approve both of them, February 6th and 16th.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, roll call vote, Caesar,
Aye.
Tom Gray,
Aye.
Jason Simeoni,
Aye.
Tom Baelish,
All right.
aye for me, Evan.
Aye.
All right, passes. All right, next on the agenda is committee reports. I'll just go through, Caesar, you had one now, right, schools?
Yep, just
Any-
schools. I don't have anything to report.
Okay. Have they presented their budget yet?
They have talked about it, but they haven't really had anything beyond that.
Okay. Can you maybe, when they do have a budget available, because they have like their presentation that we've asked them not to go into that level of detail this year, but focus more on the budget. We should read it beforehand, so if that becomes available, can you kind of alert?
Yeah, totally.
You know,
I
maybe
will.
through Evan that it's available and he can get
Okay.
it up. All right. Tom Baelish?
I don't have anything to report.
Okay. Tom Gray?
Nope.
Jay?
I watched Stewart video the other day. They had their more budget discussion. they have a public hearing coming up for a change in rules and regulation, but I don't remember what the date is. And they also talked about, I guess, Pondview, something through the ZBA where that's gone to the PAC, the Housing Action Committee or something. It's kind of like
Yep.
on the back burner maybe for a little bit from the timeline. I think that's it.
Yeah, for Pondview, both the applicant and the town agreed to go to that hack.
Yeah.
In order to-
Housing Committee.
Yeah, in order to determine whether they think the town has the ability to override the legislative bodies through the ZBA.
Yeah, the intermunicipal agreement requirements or.
Right, and in addition, for sewer, they have to get agreements from Leominster and Fitchburg. So does our
Pittsburgh
ZBA have the ability to affect two cities?
override.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Kind of complicated issue.
yep. All right, Evan, did you have any?
Nothing to report.
All right, and I didn't have anything to report since last week either. All right, future meeting topics, anything besides, the current old business, which we probably should keep on until such time, or the upcoming meeting budget presentations? Okay, great. I think we'll be busy enough, so that's good. All right, any public comment from the public, which I guess that would just be Amanda, who's semi-public. Any public comment from the board? All right, the upcoming meetings are listed. The next one is a week from today, which is IT and police. The March 7th, we have the joint meeting with school committee and select board with the state reps like we talked about. March 9th is DPW and facilities. March 16th, fire and schools. March 22nd is administrative unclassified debt services and Monty Tech. March 23rd is PAC, sewer, and other moneyed articles. And then our first public hearing, and perhaps only, I doubt it, is on March 30th. So we have a full every week cadence from now through the end of March. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second?
All right, Tom Bailish, we'll make it easy. Tom Bailish moved, Tom Gray seconded. All those in favor, roll call vote. Caesar?
Aye.
Tom Gray?
Aye.
Jay?
Aye.
Tom Bailish?
All right.
Evan?
Aye.
And I for me. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Night, gentlemen.
Thanks, everyone.
Hope you're feeling better, Evan.
Thank you. Hopefully, me too.
Get your strength.